Hello everyone, welcome to the Pocket-Sized Tales YouTube channel. My name's Edward, and I'll be narrating today's story. If you're new here, we write and narrate our own stories. Please purchase a t-shirt from the Pocket Shop or leave a super thanks if you'd like to support the channel. Other than that, please like, comment, subscribe, and share the content with your friends and family. Also, hit that bell notification so you'll be alerted when a new story is uploaded. Thanks everyone. Now on to the story. Shadows in the woods. Matt had always been drawn to the wilderness. The allure of solitude, the embrace of nature, and the escape from the cacophony of civilization had always been his refuge. He was an avid outdoorsman, a seasoned survivalist, and a connoisseur of the wild. And as the leaves began to turn crimson and gold, beckoning the onset of autumn, Matt's yearning for the solace of the forest grew insatiable. He planned meticulously, as he always did. His trusty backpack contained carefully selected provisions: dried food, a portable stove, a sleeping bag, and a map marked with the coordinates of his chosen destination, the Wraithwood Hollow. He'd been there many times before and found solace in it. If he had a choice, Matt would certainly move there in a heartbeat. It was secluded from the worries of the world, but he loved it more so for its uncanny beauty. The place had a reputation for an unusually high number of campers going missing every year, but he'd never had a problem while there. It was his home away from home. The evening before his departure, Matt stood on the porch of his modest cabin, gazing out at the flickering lights of civilization beyond the tree line. He couldn't help but smile at the thought of the solitude that awaited him. He knew that for the next week he'd be entirely cut off from the world. He was even leaving his phone behind, embracing the isolation with a sense of liberation. The journey to Wraithwood Hollow was uneventful, but the moment Matt ventured into the heart of the woods, an unsettling silence descended. It was something he hadn't felt before. While pitching his tent and gathering firewood under the dense canopy, he couldn't shake the feeling of being stalked from the shadows. Every rustling leaf in the breeze or movement in the trees heightened his alertness. Night fell like a shroud, and the woods came alive with eerie sounds. Matt's campfire crackled, casting dancing shadows among the trees. It was then, in the murky darkness, he saw them, tall and gangly dark figures lurking at the edge of the fire's light. Their features remained hidden, but their presence sent shivers down Matt's spine. The figures seemed to move closer, step by silent step, and Matt felt a growing sense of dread. He fumbled for his flashlight, sweeping it in their direction, but they were gone, vanished into the obscurity of the woods. Matt's heart raced, and he questioned whether the legends surrounding the forest might be more than mere stories. The forest had become a waking nightmare. Matt's exhaustion weighed him down like a leaden blanket, and he fought to stay awake, to maintain a shred of rationality in the face of mounting paranoia. The ceaseless whispering of the trees and the eldritch shadows dancing in the moonlight threatened to pull him deeper into the abyss. He knew he couldn't afford to sleep. Not now. But his eyelids grew heavy, and the urge to surrender to fatigue was overwhelming. He resisted, desperately trying to focus on the crackling campfire, its wavering flames a fragile barrier against the encroaching darkness. Yet, despite his best efforts, sleep claimed him like a vengeful specter, dragging him into its inky depths. The forest seemed to conspire against him, lulling him into a fitful slumber. In his dream, he found himself on a serene hike through a forest much like the one that had ensnared him. The path was dappled with sunlight, and the air was filled with the sweet scent of pine. But as he ventured deeper, the idyllic scene transformed into a horrifying sight. Before him, the mangled gray and blackened corpses of the missing campers lay strewn across the forest floor, their twisted limbs contorted in grotesque positions. The vacant, milky eyes bore into his soul, accusing him with a silent condemnation. The air grew thick with an oppressive sorrow, and a chilling dread settled in his chest. The corpses began to stir, their lifeless bodies twitching and convulsing. Some crawled while others got up and shambled toward him, their movements stiff and unnatural. Matt tried to run, but they were everywhere. Their hollow eyes locked onto him, and the closest one, opened its gaping mouth, emitting a soundless scream that pierced the very fabric of his dream. Matt jolted awake from a distant shriek in the dark, his heart pounding, his body slick with cold sweat. Terror coursed through him as he realized he was back in his tent, surrounded by the haunting presence of the malevolent dark dwellers. Frantic and disoriented, he knew he had to escape this cursed place. The dream, or nightmare, felt like a warning from the dead, a dire message he couldn't ignore. In a frenzied panic, he packed his essential belongings, his hands trembling as he worked in the dim light of his flashlight. The forest outside pressed in on him, its ominous presence more palpable than ever. With the dream still haunting his thoughts, Matt left his tent behind, an eerie monument to his time in Wraithwood Hollow. He clutched the flashlight tightly in his hand, its beam cutting through the obsidian night like a fragile lifeline. In the dead of night, with the forest blanketed in darkness, he rushed out into the unknown, each step carrying him further from the heart of the haunting woods. The dream had become a catalyst for his escape, a chilling reminder he couldn't ignore the sinister forces lurking in the shadows. As he fled into the night, the trees seemed to part reluctantly, their whispered secrets trailing after him like spectral fingers. Desperation gnawed at him as he ran. But as he made his way to the forest's edge, an inexplicable force seemed to hold him back. It was as though the very trees conspired to keep him within the haunted woods. Whichever direction he ran in took him back to where he started, as if he was stuck in some sort of loop. Matt's nerves frayed with each passing second. He could no longer distinguish reality from paranoia. The once inviting solitude became his dark prison, and the forest echoed with shrill voices mocking his attempts to flee. Just as he was about to give up, something dawned on him. Matt stood before the towering inferno he created, his heart pounding in his chest like a drum. The flames roared, casting flickering wild shadows dancing upon the gnarled trees. It was a blaze of defiance, a last-ditch effort to break the spell the Shadow Stalkers wove around him. His fingers shook as he clutched the torch in his hand, the flames reflecting in his eyes, burning with a mix of determination and sorrow. The woods had been his sanctuary for countless years, now stood engulfed in an inferno of his own making. Images of the forest's beauty flooded his mind, the tranquil streams, the emerald canopies, and the rustling leaves that sang the songs of nature. He remembered the countless mornings when the sun's rays had filtered through the leaves, warming his face and soothing his soul. Matt loved these woods, and they were his refuge from the chaos of the world. But now the forest has become a prison, and the Shadow Stalkers its warden. He couldn't bear the thought of burning the place he cherished to the ground, but he knew if he didn't act, he wouldn't have been able to leave it alive. With each flicker of the flames, he felt as though he was setting fire to a piece of his own heart. Tears welled in his eyes as he gazed at the towering trees that sheltered him for so long. He whispered a heartfelt apology to the woods, a whispered farewell to the ancient oaks and the murmuring streams. But he knew that this was the only way. The Shadow Stalkers thrived in the darkness, and the forest had become its domain. As the flames consumed the trees, Matt felt the oppressive weight clinging to him begin to lift. The air crackled with the intensity of the blaze, and he could almost hear the anguished wails of the Shadow Stalkers as they recoiled from the searing heat. As the flames devoured the trees, the smothering presence of the Shadow Stalkers began to dissipate like a fading nightmare. It was a painful sacrifice, but it was the only way to sever the bond that had imprisoned him. With a heavy heart, Matt turned away from the inferno, his steps carrying him further from the burning forest. With the Shadow Stalker's spell broken as the flames consumed the last vestiges of darkness, Matt emerged from the ashes, scarred but unbroken, and finally free from the haunting grasp of the Wraithwood Hollow. Matt left the woods behind in his Jeep, returning to his cabin, weary but relieved. Unbeknownst to Matt, a sole-surviving Shadow Stalker had followed him home. The faceless being lurked just beyond the tree line of his backyard, watching patiently for the opportunity to exact its revenge as Matt stepped out of his vehicle.